I'll now pass over to our one and only Sam Warner.
Smashing, thank you very much, Adrian. How many people here love doing admin? Hey. Oh, Gina, come on. That can't be true. I have to say, admin isn't one of my favorites, for sure. And when I was told that writing a business plan meant something that was probably at least 60 pages long, and that might be the only way to unlock a business bank account, which I have to pay for. Funnily enough, I just carried on with my current account, and I thought, why do I need to spend a lot of time and a lot of brain power trying to answer all of these questions about what my market share is and what percentage of competitors I need to worry about? And so many of the things were unknowns. So how could I possibly fill them out? And in university, I did business management. So I was instructed that, if you didn't have a business plan, your plan was, your business was going to fail. It was really bad. You have to have the business plan. You're going to need it all the time. When in fact, in my experience, working for other people, having a business plan does not mean you're successful. It doesn't mean that people refer back to it. They just make stuff up as they go along. That's just humans. So I'm recommending that we don't write a 60-page business plan. I have been introduced to a tool that I wanted to share with you today. It's completely free. We like a free tool. Oh, yes. And in the chat, if you scroll back up a little bit, you'll see the Lean Canvas JPEG. I put it into the chat. If you can't see it, let me know. Yep, Gina's already printed it off. That's what I call proactive. And there's probably sharper, clearer versions of it on the net, but I just grabbed one for now. And it's an incredibly useful tool because it's all on one page and it's asking you the most important questions you need to know if you're at the very start of your entrepreneurial journey. I want you to take solace in the fact that you don't have to do anything in any way that somebody tells you to do it in terms of how you run your business and your approach. The mavericks who go off and do their own thing are often the most successful of all because they're not towing the line, doing the admin, and doing as they're told. I'm one of those mavericks. I'm not very good at doing as I'm told. It's got me into trouble a few times, but actually, good things have happened more than bad things. The Lean Canvas is this one-page model, and it includes every aspect of your business. And it's the quickest way to find like the riskiest parts of your business model. And so you can kind of give that your attention first. And if you're having conversations with potential funders and they're banging on about your 60-page business plan, I almost guarantee the funder would prefer to look at a one-pager. Think how many 60-page business plans they have to read. If I had to do that, I think I'd lose the will to live. I'm going to share my screen now because I'm going to walk you through how you will fill out this wonderful new plan. Okay. So here is the plan that you all have access to. And there's a particular sequence we're going to go in to fill out this piece of paper. You don't just fill it out from left to right. And the sequence was worked out by the person who invented this. And it's about your thought process and how to organize your thoughts. And if you look at the screen, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, there's teeny tiny little versions of that picture, and they've got numbers on them. And that tells you the sequence, but also I'm going to share this slide deck with you afterwards, so you will have the sequence much bigger and much more clearly. So don't worry about trying to see it because it's so tiny. Okay, I'm just going to make you bigger because I want to see you while I'm doing this. I like to see my audience. There you are. Hello, Pegasaurians. So the very first one we're going to do is we're going to understand the problem that we're trying to solve. Now, for me, I've used me in this example. I just thought it would be easier to do that. So I just find it easier than an abstract thing that doesn't exist yet. So the three things that I needed to solve was that people were experiencing high attrition. Their teams were experiencing a lack of innovation. People were just turning up, going to work and going home. And they were experiencing quite a bit of conflict, difficult conversations, including like poor feedback, all that sort of stuff. And the existing alternatives were that they could recruit more staff if they've got high attrition, but of course that's got a cost. They could pay for consultants to come in and innovate with their whizzy great ideas, but that's super expensive as well. Or they could just avoid it altogether. And unfortunately, if you avoid the problem, it doesn't go away. Quite often it gets worse and turns into things like grievances and tribunals, and that has a cost to it. So the existing alternatives, and that's not exhaustive, there's obviously going to be more than that. I'm just giving 3 for now, otherwise we'll be here forever. But it's an example of how you might list the problems so that when you're communicating with your potential clients, they say to themselves, wow, this Sam, she really understands our pain. That's what we want them to say. This is the person I want to come in and solve my problems because they get it. Now, the second one is our customer segments over here on the right-hand side. And you need to understand your customers. So who is your customer? Where are they working? What sector? What industry? And you can't be all things to all people. So it's really interesting. I've got a big old list there of 10 things. And stereotypically, because I work in the neurodivergent space, there's an awful lot of clients of mine in those 10 different spaces. So even though I don't actively market to those spaces, that's how I've ended up working. So those are the segments I am working in. But I actually only target the number one when I'm doing my LinkedIn stuff or whatever. I've always got my IT company in my mind. That's who I'm talking to. It just so happens that other organizations chime with that language. They're experiencing very similar problems. And the early adopters are, the people I've already had as clients. So what did I like about them? They were really keen to amp up their diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's DE and I. And they were open to listening and actually putting the suggested changes into place. They're not paying lip service to it. It wasn't just, can you come along for half an hour and talk about diversity so we can tick it off? It was, how can we change our culture? How can we make this part of our offering? How can we attract and retain neurodivergent staff? Because we understand that diversity of thought is the thing to have. And then you're going to look at your unique value proposition. So what makes me different from anyone else selling the same kind of services as I do? Why am I special? So my unique value proposition is that I'm an autistic, ADHD, late diagnosed woman with 25 plus years experience in corporate, uniquely positioned to interpret between the neurodivergent and neurotypical employees and clients. It's a bit of a mouthful, but actually that is the shortest I could get it. I really tried hard, but it's such a big subject. It's hard to really consolidate it. And I call myself the autistic interpreter. So that's as short as it gets, even though I don't just talk about autistic people. It's the panoply of neurodivergent staff and clients. So that's the 3 big boxes done already. We've only got a few more to do. See how quickly this is coming together. I appreciate you might want a few minutes with a cuppa and a pen, maybe, if you're going to do it by hand, or your tablet if you prefer to work digitally. But it's not that difficult. I just made this in PowerPoint and I found a post-it note slide thingy, and I just used that to add my content because I could move it around really easily and change it and whatnot. But it's not that difficult for people to do. I'm not using any special highfalutin tools. I'm just using what I've got because I'm a big fan of free. So the next section is about the solution. Do you remember we talked about what's the problem that you're solving? And if you still haven't refined your problem, I'd recommend you don't try to fill out the solution, because a lot of people will go to the solution box first. This is what I do. I solve this. I help people with that. But unless it actually answers a problem, you won't be able to sell it. Because no one will be going, oh, you understand my problem? Great, you've got a solution, take my money. And this is where people get trapped at the very beginning of their business with the, I can be all things to all people. And if you imagine it like a fishing net that's a finite size, if you spread that fishing net wide, wide, wide over the ocean, the holes are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're never going to catch anything. Whereas if you cast that net over a much narrower piece of ocean, you're far more likely to catch some fish. And that's exactly what we're doing by outlining the problem really clearly and only then looking at the solution. So my solution to the problems that I highlighted is we can change team culture so that people feel respected, valued, etc. So notice I'm only putting the headlines on here. There's lots of detail behind it because I've thought about what that means. But this is the headlines of what I'm doing so that I can show it to somebody very, very easily. The lack of innovation, I spoke about diversity of thought earlier and how that generates innovation. Don't just employ a bunch of clones. And so many people are not self-aware and they don't know how to give or receive feedback. Now, I have to say, sometimes I have to tell them all about Toastmasters, because nobody gives feedback like a Toastmaster. And we know that it works. We know that language is really important. We know that our poor little sensitive lizard brains are waiting for the kick in the teeth that's coming when somebody announces they're going to criticize you or give you constructive criticism. That word should be banned from the English language. Instead of, can I give you a suggestion on how you could enhance this? Would you like this to go from really good to epic? Because I'd love to share something with you. How wonderful that we can use this different language. So when I'm talking to clients, I lure them, I seduce them with language to help them understand the power that it has and how they can make significant changes to the problems that they've got. And other people don't tend to go there because it's corporate and you don't say stuff like that, right? Well, the Maverick's in the house. The next thing is you're going to decide, well, so how will you reach your customers? Hello, customers, come to me. The different channels you're going to use will determine how you're going to get your content and your sales out there. Are you going to be using social media? Not everybody does, because that might not be where your clients reside. Do you have a banging website where if somebody happened upon you, you can sell from your website, or at least entertain an inquiry? Does it show you yourself off to the best of your ability? Has it got too much info? Has it got too little info? Does it not even look like you? Does it not even sound like you? If I visited any of your websites, if you have a website, how quickly would I understand what you do? Would I be able to explain it to someone else? So really digging in and clarifying, if these are my main channels, how are they serving me? Is it word of mouth? Is it, previous customers telling their mates, oh, we had this brilliant person, Gina, she was amazing. You've got to have her at your next event. You can't buy that kind of PR. It's just wonderful. Is it because you've been to networking events and they've allowed you to do like a little 60-second pitch or a little presentation and you've inspired people? That might be a great way of getting customers in for your particular speciality. And for me, I've got the PSA, the Professional Speaking Association, because for me, I will often get an inquiry based from the speaker on a different subject has delivered some content into a client of theirs, and the client has said to them, oh, by the way, do you know anyone who speaks on neurodiversity? And because I'm building a relationship with these other speakers in the PSA, often they'll go, actually, I do, here's her number. So that is a strategic group that I'm a member of. And so that's why it's on my channels, because it's something I am doing deliberately. Now then, we're nearly there. We've only got 4 more boxes to go. And, I've only been talking for about 17 minutes. It's not going to take long for you to fill this out. So it's not going to be a really horrible, hard, arduous, avoid it kind of task, hopefully. I mean, this may be too much admin for you anyway, just one whole page, but hopefully it looks a lot more manageable than a conventional business plan. So we're on to number 6. And number 6 is taking us down the page, and we're going to talk about revenue. So what are you going to sell? How much money will it bring in? How many of them do you have to sell to make the minimum you need to survive in a month? If you need to bring in £2,000 a month to pay all of your bills, you need to find out, okay, so what products or services am I going to sell that are going to give me that money? And that's when you decide what your prices are. So the revenue streams is where you list your prices. And this is where I urge you to be brave. When I first started out, I used to charge people £30 an hour, which is ridiculous. What it told everyone was I was a novice. I was new. I was unsure. It didn't tell people, oh, I'm a real value for money kind of gal. It wasn't the messaging I thought it was. And as soon as I started putting my prices up, that's when things started to change for the better, because I've thought about the Stella Artois advert. The reassuringly expensive was one of their taglines. It's like when you go to Marks and Spencer. The salad that you buy in Marks and Spencer probably isn't a million miles away from one you can get in Tesco. They're going to be pretty similar. But because it's Marks and Spencer's, you don't mind paying an extra £1 or £2 because it's Marks and Spencer's. So you trust that it's going to be amazing. If they were selling an identical product, like, I don't know, a tray, for carrying your dinner on, just a tray, one in Tesco's, one in Marks and Spencer's, the perception is that Marks and Spencer's will be a better quality, and therefore you would pay a bit more, even though the tray is identical in every way. I'm mentioning that because you have to think more like Marks and Spencer's. Don't be Tesco, don't be Aldi, be more Marks and Spencer's and Waitrose. People will buy those things if they think, wow, this is the expert in the room. This is the person who can solve all of my problems. They will put their hand in their pocket. And one of the best feelings ever is where you take a deep breath and you submit a quote for work and you put down the biggest price you've ever written, and they email you back and they go, That's great. Fantastic. Let's go ahead. There's nothing quite like it. It's my content. It's my delivery. I'm in control of everything. And they're willing to put their hand in their pocket. And I'll tell you, I've just had that experience. I've been in business for a long time. And this is the first time that I've had that amazing feeling. And one job is going to bring me £2,640. And that's 2 days of prep and 1 day of delivery. And they probably want to repeat that training. So the delivery day may be a repeat for me. And as you can see from my price, my revenue streams, I charge 970 for a day's delivery. I only need 2 of those in a month to cover my bills. Suddenly my business starts to look like it's a real goer. I'm actually going to cover my bills. I might even be able to take a wage. OMG. That'd be amazing. Wow. I might have to be VAT registered. That would be awesome. So it's a really fun exercise, the revenue streams part. You don't have to think, well, I don't know how much to charge. A bit of it is put your finger in the, the air and what feels right. What I can tell you, there is an appetite for things like lunch and learn for around £270, £300 for an hour. And that's usually 40 minutes plus a Q&A. So it's only 40 minutes really. And if you have a key product, something that you're known for, you can just keep selling the same thing over and over again. No extra prep time required. And what I have discovered in my business is that, yes, I could create a video, but people won't buy a video for £270, but they will buy me live for £270 for 40 minutes. It's only 40 minutes. At the moment, that's a good use of my time. In the fullness of time, when I revisit this, as my business expands and grows, maybe I'll have trainers that I employ who will deliver the lunch and learns to the content that I provide. And then I'll free up even more time for myself to create more content. So I have got my eye on a longer plan, but for now, this is sort of, where am I now? What am I doing now? I think a 5-year plan is very, very difficult to do. Who knows what the future is going to bring? January 2020, after I'd got over my very bad flu that I had for 8 weeks, which turned into pneumonia, which wasn't fun. Who knows what kind of flu it might have been, but it was pretty bad. And in February, as I was recovering, I noticed that my calendar was actually full of speaking gigs, and I uttered the fateful words, "This is going to be my best year ever." Yeah, so obviously that didn't happen. And so I feel like I've stalled slightly. So if we just wipe out the last 2.5 years, 3 years, and just pretend that we're still where we were, then actually my business is moving forward as I hoped. So got to look at these things glass half full. We've only got 2 boxes left, so let's address those. The next one is also on the bottom there, the cost structure. And you're going to be listing out all of the costs that you've got to pay, because you need to be aware of how much you need to cover with your revenue streams. So I mentioned that I need to earn about £2,000 to cover my bills. Well, that includes the fixed costs as well as the variable costs. So I've got, car, equipment, software subscriptions, membership to personal development organizations and networks. That's all part of my fixed costs. I know what they are every month. And if I had premises, I'd include rent, etc., and heating and lighting and all that sort of stuff. But as it is, I'm working from home. My variable costs are when I travel. So I have travel and accommodation. When I quote a price to a client, I don't add any extra onto it. So I don't add any travel or accommodation or anything like that. If they want to provide it, I'll bite their hand off, but I give them that price. And I'm okay with that. It's my choice to do so. I'm sure in the fullness of time, I may change. We'll see. But certainly, you know, get a rail card. You can go quite easily. And we know that places like the Premier Inn are only £49 a night. So actually, it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg when you're traveling to deliver training in another place. So we're nearly there. We've only got these 2 left now. And the next one is our key metrics. And these are the numbers that we're going to be watching closely to see if we are gaining or losing traction with your customers. Has anyone heard of split testing? Yep, Simon, yeah. So split testing is where you might put out a very similar piece of content, usually on the same platform, but perhaps you've put a different picture with one than the other, but you want them both to do the same job. So I want you to book on this new course I've got. All the details are exactly the same. One's got a picture of me and the other one's got a generic picture of people like in a classroom. And you put them both out and then you see how many views, likes, comments, shares you get, and you start to understand what images work better. So you can then drop the one that does poorly and then try again with the new image and perhaps fresh images until you get the sweet spot, because there are certain images and videos that do very, very well. So there's a trial and error to it. And those metrics really help you to identify those. Now, you might employ a VA or some, virtual assistant or someone like that to do these things for you. You don't have to be technical and do them yourself. Or it might be that you want to learn how to do these things, and that's okay too. I would be wary of numbers that look really promising and look really rosy and sort of promise to deliver things and then they don't, because it's a horrible feeling when you're like, oh, that didn't do as well as I thought it would. Facebook ads is a classic example. They'll tell you, oh, for your money, we're going to show it to 6,000 people. And then when the campaign's over, you find out they've shown it to 1,500. Like, sorry, you said you were going to show it to 6,000 people. That's what I paid for. What happened? And there's no recourse either. So there's no way of saying, hang on a minute. So it's good to be informed when you're using your metrics. My metrics, I'm also using metrics for myself as well as for my social media stuff and how things perform. So I'm working out number of booked training courses in a month. So I've got a target I'm trying to meet, and have I done that? My increased engagement on social media, which is what I was just talking about, and also I'm actually trying to push up my 2,000 to a minimum of £3,000 a month. So I've got a bit of a cushion, especially because not every month is the same amount. You have highs and lows when you're running your own business. And lastly, the very last box that's on there is the unfair advantage. And this is, well, so why would you choose me instead of someone else who talks about neurodivergent stuff? An unfair advantage is something that someone else can't really easily copy or buy. So for me, I think my unfair advantage is that I have a lived experience of masking for 49 years. Now, there are other people who have lived experience of masking for multiple years, but it's also, I have the ability to use storytelling and metaphors to simplify complex information. So those are my 2 big unfair advantages I've noticed some other people don't have. And that first one is because there's quite a lot of people doing what I do, and they're autistic allies. They're not autistic themselves. And there's nothing quite like lived experience to bring these stories to life. And so that is how my plan looks. I've put the numbers in there so you can see. And like I said, I'll make sure I pop this into our WhatsApp group so you all have access to this. If it's too big, I'll put it somewhere and put the link. But I hope that you're finding it useful. You'll be able to sit down with a cuppa and work out, so what would I put in here? What would my business idea look like? And If you want to talk about it or anything like that, happy to have a one-to-one where we can, you know, work through it together if you find it difficult doing these things on your own. I just think that's a really effective way of clearly articulating to yourself and to others what exactly you're trying to achieve in your business without having to write 60 pages. So do take solace that you don't have to write War and Peace, which might have put a lot of people off even trying to start a business. And there are tools out there to try and help us do these things more easily, more effectively, and certainly in a reduced amount of time. So at the beginning, I asked you, do you like doing admin? And what's the answer now? Yes! And now I'm open for questions. I'll leave it up in case the questions are pertaining to what's on the screen.
George has got one.
George, go for it.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much. I loved it. I love the one-page thing. I'm a visual person, so if I get it done, I'll be very happy. But when I get it done, I'll be very happy. So the first thing is the problem. I'm just looking at this example you gave us. So it's like, this comes out of a survey on areas you wanted to work, out of your mind, out of a common sense. Where does information of the problem comes from?
Talking to my prospective clients and asking them, where is your pain right now? What's hurting you? What's costing you money?
Yes. Money, time, or health, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that hurts the business in some way. Sure.
All right. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Tim.
Did Gina have a point? She was.
No, I was just thanking you, really. I don't think I was going to mention something about the metrics, because only something probably to add to, and I can't remember the actual acronym that goes with it and what it's meant to be, but actually, in order to get number of training courses booked, so if you wanted, 2 a month, how many messages out there do you need? How many calls do you need to have? How many sales calls do you need to have? So getting to know how many, what your conversion rate is like. Okay, in order to have 2 courses, I need to make 5 sales calls because my heart conversion rate is quite high. And then you've got, this is what I'm learning as I'm going through my thing as well. So your message out there is the first one. I've got to connect with 100 people. Out of that, I get 10 people come back to me. So then you've got to actually, okay, I've changed the message up, and then does that metric go up or down? So it's all, and you mentioned it earlier about that, shifting the little things about how we can. So once we can get a process that sort of works, we can look at improving that process, and that's when it comes handy to hire coaches, and because we're super rich, and get to the detail of how we can improve and move on with our business. So this has been really good, so thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Gina. Yes, for all of these very high level sort of things, you could have like another layer of information behind each one, numbered handily. So number 8 could be full of all of your metrics, your split testing, your ideas, all of that kind of stuff on how you're going to measure what you need. Yeah, absolutely right. Thanks, Gina. Tim.
The business model I'm thinking of employing and what I'm doing is more sort of getting investors in first. Would you use this as your pitch to investors? Would you add on another business plan with more pages, more detail, or what would be your thoughts on that in terms of this format?
So I wouldn't. I would just use this page. I wouldn't put any extra detail. In my experience, people who are on funding boards don't like a lot of detail. They just want you to get to the point. When I worked at the University of Wolverhampton, I worked in the project support office where people are pitching for funding all the time for research projects. So you've got a panel of funders quite often from disparate industries. So you'll have someone from finance, someone from an undertaker's, you'll have someone who was, you know, born into being a billionaire and likes to fund stuff. There's all sorts of people on a panel. And quite often they know nothing about your specialist subject, and they don't care why you're doing it. Usually they just want to know, why would they give you their money? What's the outcome? What problem are you solving for the world? It's at that point when you're asking for money, they're not that interested in the emotional connection that you have with your why. They may ask about it if you've got somebody who's sensitive and interested in it, but I wouldn't lead with it.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. You could have something ready detailed if you really wanted to, in case someone said, can you put more flesh on the bones? But I wouldn't submit it unless they ask for it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Adrian. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for a great masterclass. How often would you review and update this?
Well, I look at this every quarter because things move quite quickly in my business. And sometimes I'll get a client that bought one thing, but actually wants something else as well now. And that's a new problem that I will now create a solution for. So I'm going to add that into the problems that I solve section and how I might package that. So I'm adding to my offerings. And also, if I'm finding that nobody is booking my 90-minute one-to-one coaching, then I just won't offer it. I'll just drop it off completely. I might do an ad hoc one. They tend to be one-to-ones with parents of children who've just been diagnosed or are yet to be diagnosed. So they're very different to all of the other work I do. It's almost like if I could afford it, I'd do it for free, which is why it's so low in price. So yeah, I review it every quarter. It's quite useful to me to keep it in mind. Any other questions? Oh, Lillian.
Hi, thanks, Sam. It was really, really useful and informative. So earlier on, Georgia asked about how you found out about the problems. You mentioned that it was you asked your prospective clients. Did you do that via a survey? And what did you do?
So the personal touch is really important. So if you're going business to business rather than business to client or customer, I'd recommend that you use LinkedIn as your tool for getting to know people, building rapport, having a Zoom coffee with them. It doesn't work for everyone. It really works for me in my business to have that conversation, find out what they do. They find out my background. We discover if we want to work together, if there's synergy, whether we can refer each other. And if they're just someone who really likes the stuff that I post, sometimes it's just an interesting conversation with somebody, but they've now become a big raving fan of mine. It's great. And they'll answer any questions. It's super duper. And if I end up helping them on the fly, unexpectedly with something that they've got that they want to talk through, the law of reciprocity kicks in and they're like, oh, but what can I do for you? So they're looking for ways to refer me, or they're writing a recommendation for me on LinkedIn because they want that balance.
Oh, makes sense. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, Adrian.
I was going to ask about the problem area. When you've got clients and they've got a specific problem, do you sometimes find from experience they don't really define the problem clearly, and sometimes you have to get to the bottom of it, or they think the problem's in one area but it's actually somewhere else? Do you ever go into that detail?
Yes. Now, sometimes they're not ready to hear it. So a lot of places where I go in and I actually end up talking about neurodivergent staff and conflict and things like that. It starts off with they think they need a session on handling difficult conversations and feedback, which they do, but the cause of the challenges they're going through is often because there's a neurotypical boss trying to get the best out of a neurodivergent employee, and there's just this clash. So I kind of unravel it in the session, hide it in the session. Okay, last question, Georgia.
Well, I just want to follow what Adrian said. So in terms of revenue streams, that preliminary talk, do you charge it as a one-to-one meeting, or is it part of the, you know, preparation for the package you're selling?
So if it's just like a 30-minute getting to know you chat, I don't charge for those. They pay off in other ways. So I don't charge for those. And I use a tool called Calendly, which I find quite hard to say, which, yes, it does have a fee, but actually it's quite a small fee and it's worth it because I'm able to send someone a link and then they can just look at their diary and look at how it matches what I'm offering, and they can just pick a date. Otherwise you end up with this sort of email ping pong, or you have to ring each other or whatever. Really useful tool. And you can have things of different lengths. So I've got a 30-minute free session. I've got a 90-minute free session. I've got a 90-minute paid session connected to Stripe. So they have to pay me up front for that session. And there are longer sessions people can book for some of the bigger pieces, like the 3-hour sessions at £470. But I'm usually invoicing people rather than doing it through Stripe. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks. But the original question was going to be this. So I'm looking at this, which is probably revised in the last quarter. You said, if I'm at the beginning of creating everything regarding what I'll be doing in the years to come. So how and what percentage would you say that this last version of what you're doing is very different from the first one you made? And where are the key areas that have changed, if so?
Okay, it's completely different. I wasn't niching when I began, so I was trying to be all things to everybody. I was also, I cringe at the term, I was a life coach in the beginning. And that just became hideously misused by 23-year-olds who were like, I'm going to be a life coach. And you're like, you haven't lived yet. I was trying to help people make decisions and take action and keeping them accountable and things like that. That was the problem I thought I was trying to solve, and also doing a bit of soft skills training. So that was sort of working, but this has definitely evolved, which is why revisiting is so important, because you can keep tweaking it and adding and changing and taking away. Just be mindful that you're not just adding all the time, because it's going to get really big and really unmanageable and you'll feel overwhelmed. So it's a bit like the closet theory. If you buy an item of clothing, you need to let go of an item of clothing. Otherwise you end up drowning under the clothes.
Well, another beautiful metaphor. Thank you very much, Sam.
Thanks, Georgia. And that's me done. Thank you very much. Back to you, Adrian.
And give Sam a rapturous rock star round of applause.
Yeah. Well done. Very good.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you very much.